Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for a talk with TALIS Creative. My name is Jamie Campbell, and I'm the Manager of Alumni Engagement, Annual and Legacy Giving at Georgian College. And before we go any further today, I'm going to begin today's event the way we begin all events at Georgian College, and that's with our official land acknowledgement. Georgian College acknowledges that all campuses are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. Georgian College is dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. As I noted, my name is Jamie Campbell, and it is my honor to welcome two proud Georgian graduates today to speak to us about what it is they do as a creative agency, and to provide some tips on what we should be looking for when we're working with an agency. Our first graduate today is Anthony, there he is Anthony Gasperis, who is a 2012 graduate of the Art and Design Fundamentals and Web Animation and Design programs. Through playing hockey, Anthony has been able to solve challenges in high-pressure situations. He's capable of slowing down and analyzing the available options while still moving at a high pace. With his passion for the sport, strategic thinking, and desire to give back, Anthony now volunteers as a youth hockey coach when he's not behind his desk at TALIS Creative. Oh yeah, and he's also an avid Leafs fan. Go Leafs, go, next year. And our next guest is Ryan Duncan. He's a 2010 graphic design grad. And when Ryan isn't solving branding challenges, he's usually trying to figure out his way out of a chokehold. As a jiu-jitsu athlete, he's been able to learn how to read and analyze situations and think critically to determine his next strategic move. These skills have been valuable to his advancement in the sport, everyday life, and in business. So a couple of housekeeping tips before I turn the call over to Ryan and Anthony today. I'll just remind everybody that today's session is being recorded, and there is a Q&A function on the call. So for any questions that attendees may have, please post them into the Q&A function, and we'll be sure to address them before the call ends today. At this time, I'll now turn things over to Ryan and Anthony.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time and your attendance. I know time is valuable, so we'll just get right into it. I assume you're all here because you're in the market for a creative agency, and you probably have some questions. So Anthony and I were happy to scour the web and compile a list of the top tips for hiring a creative agency. And here they are. We can all see my screen, right?
Not yet, Ryan.
Oh, stand by. Stand by.
It's like waiting for the Leafs to win the cup, right?
Yeah, it'll never happen.
Anthony appreciates every one of those comments.
Oh yeah, I do. My bio dated very quickly.
All right, can we see my screen now?
You're good.
All right. Okay, and we're off. So top tips for hiring a graphic design agency, or sorry, a creative agency are: number one, understand your needs. So it's just important to have a basic or general understanding of what you need going in to talk to a creative agency. So for example, when it comes to branding, if you need a new logo or need a new identity, understand at least what kind of applications you're looking to have that applied to. You don't have to have a complete understanding. Any design agency or creative agency should be able to extract those details out. But having a basic understanding will go a long way to help understand the scope of the project for that design agency. Number two is know your budget. So when you're purchasing design, so to speak, it's not like buying a Big Mac combo, unless, of course, they have packages or tiers, whatever. But knowing your budget sort of helps the design agency, the creative agency scope the project based on sort of a max dollar amount that you can spend. We're not out there trying to spend every cent. What it is we're just trying to understand how broad the project can be, how to scope the project. Number 3 is review the portfolio and case studies. I mean, this is easy, but obviously reviewing the portfolio and case studies, you want to understand that, you know, their style, their aesthetic, their quality of their work is going to meet the standard that you want your brand or your piece of creative to be. Number 4, read reviews. This is kind of an iffy one. I mean, because it costs nothing for anybody to leave us, say, like a Google review. I mean, I guess it acts sort of like social proof. I mean, if there's 200 reviews and an average rating of 4.5, maybe that's something. But I think even Google reviews on I think an uncle wrote a review on our Google page, giving us a review. It costs nothing. I think you get more out of case studies. So take that one with a grain of salt. And lastly, sign a contract. This is a no-brainer. Sign a contract doesn't have to be legally binding necessarily, but what it can do is just sort of helps everyone understand their roles, who owns what at the end of the day, what gets paid, when it gets paid, and just sort of puts everything in writing and makes it clear to everyone involved, all the stakeholders. And that's generally it. Or I mean, at least we thought so. Because these are all great tips, but it's hardly new information. I mean, these are things we do, these are things we know when we make any large purchase decision. If you want to learn more, you can go on Google and search hundreds of blogs on this topic. It's readily available. But we wanted to do something a little different. In this presentation, we decided to try to sort of spin this to create a little bit more value to you. So what we were going to do is go over some misconceptions you might have hiring a creative agency. So our goal is to hopefully address these misconceptions. So if one of these thoughts enters your head, you know how to handle it. Before we get started, just a disclaimer. For this presentation, like I said, we've compiled a general list of misconceptions that we have encountered when meeting with new clients. So depending on who you are, you may strongly disagree with us, and that's fine. Just know that these are simply our opinions. So we're going to introduce the new title for this presentation. From now on, it is, we'd love to hire a creative agency, but. So let's start with point number 1. We'd love to hire a creative agency, but they're too expensive. So we're coming out of the gate swinging on this first point. This is typically the most common objection we hear from our clients who are in the market for a creative agency. I think it's important to say in this example, when we say it's too expensive, we're not talking about your ability to pay, as in you can't afford it. In this example, when we say it's too expensive, what we mean is it's not worth it. What we're talking about here is value. So some guy named Warren Buffett once said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. He seems like a smart guy. I bet you he's good with money. When pricing design, we often equate value with the amount of stuff we get for our dollar. And when I say stuff, what I mean is I'm defining it as logo concepts, revisions, web concepts, hours worked, etc. Basically the line items of a design. We'll often go through multiple estimates, line by line, trying to determine who will give us the most stuff for the best price. And what we're asking you, what we're begging you, is when it comes to design, stop thinking about stuff. Start thinking about the solution and what that solution is worth to your business. Think of the value of that solution. Because when you think of it, that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for a solution to your problem. And that problem can come in many forms. It could be increased sales, it could be more leads, greater retention, whatever. The problem is that more stuff does not equal a better solution. It does not equal more value. How valuable is that solution? Well, that depends. So let's use branding as an example, since we're a creative agency. That's what we sell in many ways. Using brand as an example, ask yourself this. How important is the new brand to my business? What will it cost my business if the new brand fails? What does my business gain if the new brand succeeds? And finally, what are those gains worth to my business? So knowing these answers should give you a general idea of how valuable the solution is to your business. From there, you can determine how much to invest in order to achieve your goal. So how much should you invest? Well, again, that depends. Here's an example that we like to use when talking through clients and trying to figure out that answer. So say you want to earn 100,000 in sales over the next 12 months. What do you feel would be a reasonable investment for you and the agency to help achieve that goal? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 50%? Ultimately, you're not buying a logo, promotional materials, or packaging. What you're buying is time. Time dedicated to solving your problem using the stuff of design. The more time means more energy, more research, more ideation, and ultimately a more effective end product. Lastly, some words of wisdom when considering how much to invest. It's a quote from brand strategist and designer Christo, and if there's any designers out there who know this guy, you're awesome. And all those who don't know, I suggest you look him up. He says, don't spend a small effort on a big result. So that is his take, Christo's take, on a quote from speaker and author Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn says, don't spend a large effort on a small result, or a big effort on a small result. Christo's take on that is the reverse. When it comes to business, is the reverse. Is that quite often we spend a little in order to achieve a lot. And I think as business people, in our experience, I should say business people, that tends to be true. Moving on. I'd love to hire a creative agency, but they're not specialists. So we're clear by specialists, what we're referring to is a creative agency that specializes in one particular medium. So website, graphic design, signage, stuff like that. There are times when hiring a specialist is undoubtedly the right thing to do. I mean, if you need bypass surgery, you're going to hire a qualified heart surgeon. In design or in creative, if you're looking for a single piece, then a specialist would be just fine. Where the issue might arise, or may arise rather, is when you hire multiple specialists for a large project with a lot of moving parts, rather than a full service creative agency. So an example would be for a branding project, it's not uncommon that I need a branding agency, a web agency, a photographer, and a marketing agency. When you bring on multiple specialists from different disciplines, you run the risk of having too many cooks in the kitchen. Each agency working against each other because they believe they have the right solution. Rather than collaborating, they're competing. I missed the slide. And in the middle, there's you having to manage the whole thing. And worse yet, the final product may be affected. And collaborating, here we go. A full service creative agency advantages lie in that they can analyze your problem holistically. They have the versatility to craft a solution that works across all media, not just one. Additionally, your project is managed by one team who will be intimately familiar with you and your business and your goals. This leaves you free to do what you do best, and that's running your business. An example for us that we've encountered, without giving away too much, we had a client, we'll call the client, who hired us on to do a branding project. This client had a very clear vision of where they wanted to go and knew all the pieces they need to get there. We were the first piece. Throughout the process, the client had hired on specialist number one, and then later specialist number two. By the time specialist number two came on, specialist number two had a clear idea what they needed from specialist number one to do in order to achieve the client's ultimate goal, to solve the problem and to achieve their goal. The problem with specialist number one had their own version, their own strategy on how to achieve that client's goal, solve the problem and achieve their goal. So throughout the entire process, they ended up butting heads. And as far as we know, our contract had expired. We had fulfilled our work. We don't know how it ended. We can only assume that it didn't end well. So that's just an anecdote, a case study in what we're talking about. Next point, we'd love to hire a creative agency, but they're not experts in my industry. So when we say that they're not experts in my industry, what we mean is a creative agency that has a specific niche. So for example, a creative agency that works exclusively with restaurants. This one might be a little spicy, so hold on. Hire a creative agency that works exclusively within your specific industry makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, they're very good at what they do. You don't have to teach them anything, and they can just simply apply the process. They've done it for your competitors, and it's worked for them, so it should work for you. I mean, makes sense, right? It may appear to be the least risky option, but is it though? If you want undifferentiated work dictated by a cookie cutter process, then hire an expert. Don't worry, I'm going to make up with that statement at the end here. But before you ask yourself, or before you do rather, ask yourself this. This another slide. Are my problems and goals the same as my competitors? A creative agency that doesn't need, a creative agency doesn't need to be an expert in your industry. It's because you're the expert. You know your business better than anyone will. A creative agency needs to be an expert in problem solving. Their advantage lies in the ability to bring fresh perspective to diagnose your unique problem. A creative agency can draw on knowledge and experience from outside your industry to craft a solution that is differentiated and unique. Because as a brand, the last thing you want to be is unremarkable, to be forgettable. So here's my olive branch. Because having said all that, admittedly, there are instances where an industry specialist is the right choice. You just need to know how to utilize them. Another example from us is we have a client looking to enter a new market in the US. Their industry is heavy regulated, lots of red tape, lots of liability. And not only that, there's a culture difference. It's a little bit more Midwest than Southern Ontario. So after sitting and consulting with this client, they came to the decision that they need to hire a local marketing agency to help them roll out. Now, the issue wasn't necessarily that we couldn't do the job. We certainly could learn how to navigate all that legislation, all that red tape. And we certainly could learn how to, we could certainly learn all the intricacies of that local culture without coming off as cliche or insulting. The issue was time. There just wasn't enough time for us. There wasn't enough time for the client. So it just made more sense to hire someone local who's familiar with that industry and familiar with that culture. And I think finally, no, not finally, one more. We'd love to hire a creative agency, but they're not big enough. So what we're talking about when we're referring to big enough, so we're referring to perception that larger creative agencies are more capable based on their in-house resources, such as size of the team, number of departments, number of services offered, so on. Being bigger certainly gives the impression they're more capable than the little guy. I mean, you can go on any creative agencies, large creative agencies website, review the team, And it consists of dozens of designers, brand strategists, half dozen creative directors, account managers, a few titles you've never heard of, like brand massagers. I don't know if that's a real title, if I just made that up, but they are out there. It all sounds impressive, certainly. They offer everything under the sun in terms of strategy, design, photography, video production, all facilitated by a fully stocked and staffed department spread across 1,000 square foot studio. And while that all sounds impressive, here's the reality. The size of the team, the number of departments, the number of in-house services has no bearing on the results. To give you an example, have you heard of Terry Richardson? Terry Richardson is most famous for being an American fashion and portrait photographer. He shot advertising campaigns for Marc Jacobs, Aldo, Supreme, Yves Saint Laurent, and many more, using nothing but a point and shoot camera. No huge roster of staff, no giant setup, just a single point and click camera. It's a side note here, it's probably more recently, he's unfortunately famous for being accused of sexual harassment by a number of women. But for this presentation, we're going to focus on the work for now. Not having the resources in-house doesn't necessarily mean the smaller agency isn't capable. Being small allows creative agencies to be agile. Instead of having to rely on in-house resources, the small agency can bring in the appropriate partners and resources needed to craft your solution. In essence, the small agency acts as a matchmaker, pairing partners and clients based on style, capabilities, personalities, effectively crafting for you the dream team. Well, I guess that was the last one. I'm as surprised as you are. In conclusion, with that, we hope you found this presentation informative, if not brief. And should you be in the market for a creative agency in the near future and you find yourself saying they're too expensive, consider what you've heard today. Otherwise, you may be turning down a long and prosperous relationship with a wonderful creative agency. Thank you. I mean, that felt like 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
And so at this time, we'll certainly, Anthony, if you've got anything that you'd like to add, certainly feel free to jump in here. But we'll also jump to a Q&A session here and invite attendees on the call to pose their questions. The first question, Ryan, that I've got here, and Anthony, and feel free to both jump in and answer. I'll rely on you to identify who's the best responder. The first question is, if someone's looking to hire a creative agency and they're asking the agency for references, what is the most appropriate way to ask an agency to provide references, and what are the limits to what someone can ask when it comes to that?
Anthony, do you want me to take it or do you want to take it?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I just think outright asking them for references, I don't think there's, you don't need to sugarcoat it. It's a business transaction. I think, again, when I say all this, I've taken it from my personal opinion. It's a business transaction. I think you're entitled to all the information needed for you to make an informed decision. So asking for, or just outright asking for references, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, personally. And what was the second part to that question?
Is there a limit to how much information someone should ask or can ask an organization? And specifically, you know, this person's noted also requesting to know past clients and to see some of the previous design work that's been produced by an agency.
Yeah, so I don't think, in terms of like off-limit information, I can't imagine there's much. I know that, speaking of the Christo, who I mentioned earlier, and we follow him on religiously, and he has mentioned that when it comes to larger transactions, large projects, six-figure contracts, for example. It's not uncommon for the client to ask for credit history. And I don't personally think that's out of bounds, because if you can be handing over significant sums of money, you want to make sure that the business you're handing that over to is going to be around in a month or two. That's just an example of just some information that would seem inappropriate to ask for, but to me, it makes absolute sense. Anthony, anything to add to that?
No, I just think to add to the first point, I think Ryan kind of hit on it, but just be direct, be straight to the point, what it is that you're trying to get what information you're trying to get from them. The last thing you want to do is have any room for misinterpretations, and get potentially the wrong information given to you, or information that might mislead you because it just is misunderstood in terms of what you wanted to have given back. So just be direct, be blunt, and I mean, ultimately you have to be comfortable with the decision that you're making. So you need the information that you need to make that comfortable decision.
And sorry, just lastly to add to that, the testament there, the referrals they're going to give you obviously are going to be cherry picked. They're going to give you their most happy, most satisfied, most successful clients. I mean, you ask for referrals and we're going to do exactly the same. So take it with a grain of salt, I guess, but there's certainly value in it. It doesn't mean that it's not valuable information.
Excellent, thank you. I've got two questions here that center around ROI. I'll ask the first question, which I think is a nice entry-level question into the second question. So the first question really asks, how would an agency measure the success and ROI of a marketing budget and outcomes?
Anthony, you want to take this one?
Sure. It really depends, I guess, on what the goal is. What is your goal that you're trying to achieve? Goal could range anything from, what you typically talk about is sales, but, some people have individual goals where they want a certain amount of followers or a certain amount of engagement or a certain amount of traffic on their website. So, when you're talking about those kind of components of marketing, there's definitely tools out there that can help measure what that looks like. But the other thing you want to also know is, what is your sales correlation to the increase in followers, to the increase of traffic? So if you have 100 people a day hitting your website, let's say, and you want to increase that to 200 people a day, well, what does that 200 a day look like to you on a sales perspective? So it's knowing kind of what those components are, and you do kind of need to have not only the tools in place to measure the analytics, but you also need to measure that against what your internal business sales and revenue looks like, to kind of be able to compare and match that information together. So in terms of if you're looking at making a sale increase in sales right now, try to analyze what your current web traffic is, or what your current engagement is, or whatever it is that you think you need some help with, and the sales that you're making at this time, and then you might be able to draw some correlation to that. There's an example that again, leaning back on Chris Do, there's an example that he talks about where he was doing a role play situation, and in this role play situation, this person wanted to have 200,000 more impressions over the course of 6 months, and they were able to figure out, again, in a role play, what that 200,000 impressions looks like in dollars and cents. So it's kind of just measuring those things out and knowing that those analytics can be there to kind of help along the way to coordinate that with what your sales looks like as well.
And I can add to that, or I'd like to add to that. To be completely honest, when it comes to things like marketing and leads and followers and all that kind of stuff, that's, like Anthony said, there's a ton of tools to sort of help measure that. Website analytics, all that kind of stuff. When it comes to branding, measuring the value of a brand, that is very difficult. Not impossible, but very difficult. Because you can't measure the success of a particular, you can, but measure the success of a particular brand. And part of that difficulty in that is that branding is a long game. And we could have a discussion, there's a whole presentation on what is a brand and all that kind of stuff. Could be a whole another half-hour discussion. But measuring a brand it's the long game, and it's really hard to see the gains made on the brand. It really comes down to, as far as I'm concerned, qualitative research, boots on the ground, trying to interview the public, your customers, or whatever, and question them and get a sense of what they think of your company, of your brand. That's the only difficult one I can see.
Excellent. Thank you to you both for those responses and for the insight. And I mentioned that it was really the entry question and into the big one, which I would imagine is potentially a common question as well, that a marketing agency might receive. And I'm going to go ahead and read it verbatim because it's relatively long and I don't want to mess up with paraphrasing.
Oh boy.
Get your notebooks ready.
Get my pen out here.
It reads, the biggest challenge I have is that an agency will ask for X amount of money up front with no guarantees or clauses that explain what happens if you've paid and at the end of it, the desired results or outcomes are not what someone's expecting. So for example, if the desired outcome is a % increase in conversion to sales, but there's no sales increase, what is the recourse since you've paid that money up front?
Great question.
Oh,
for Anthony to answer.
That's a really difficult question. It's a great question. Really, I think it's agency specific, I think, on how they handle those things. You know, at the end of the day, guarantees in this industry are extremely hard to make. And that is also dependent on the investment that's made. So if we go back to the example that Ryan had talked about, in terms of they're too expensive example, where we're talking about the goal being a revenue goal and then what to invest in that. If you think about things in terms of like stock market investments, and if you wanted to make $100,000, but your spend was, you only wanted to put $2,000 towards that, so you want a 2% investment. Well, it's going to be really, really, really difficult to make that $100,000 increase or $98,000 increase. So you have to look at that as well. So understanding the amount that you want to put towards it can give you a better understanding of how much closer you should be getting to it. Now, with that said, you know, if the needle is moved at all and you do have an increase of sales and you're ahead of where you are, you know, you need to, I think, also with the agency, establish what a baseline is. So establishing, this is the ultimate goal, but I'd also be comfortable here. You know, a success would still be this level. So if the ultimate goal is 100,000, a success might be 50,000, and you give yourself a range to play in. Might be a little bit more beneficial as well. But I think to that question, I think it comes down to, I think, the specific request and the specific goal that you're trying to get to. Like I said, there's so many different goals we come to. We have a client where we're working with right now where one of their goals is that they want to bring in and attract more quality clients that are going to pay bigger budgets and do bigger jobs. And that's a really, really hard goal to measure, because it's also relative to their ability to close that project as well. All a creative agency can do is generate the lead, but they can't close the sale. So there has to be a little bit of that going on as well, and that communication and that back and forth. Ultimately, you know, as an agency, I feel, and what we try to do is have that open communication with our clients to say, like, how are your sales going? What's going on with these leads? You know, these many contact forms have been submitted, you know, how many of them were leads? How many of them closed? So there's always a relationship going. There's always constantly just back and forth conversation so that everybody is just on the same page and that things can be fine-tuned and adjusted to try to help get to that goal.
I'll add to that as well, again. As Anthony said, it's very agency specific. And I was going to hit on the fact that for us, and Anthony had mentioned it, that what we try to emphasize is leads, not sales. Because like you said, like we can lead 1 million people to your door, but if you're a terrible salesperson and you can't close, then measuring sales is hardly our fault, or it's hardly a reasonable goal. I'm going to call upon the patron saint Chris Do again, which we may as well have just had him on. It's turning to the Chris Do show. He talks about guarantees in the creative industry, and if I hadn't mentioned it, he's a brand strategist and designer as well. He runs an agency out of California. He talks about guarantees, and he says for 20% or 10% of 100,000, there is no guarantees. All they can do is get you in the best possible position to earn that money. What that 10% does is know how much resources that they can throw at solving your problem. He does offer guarantees though, if it's say 80, 100%. So if you're willing to spend $100,000 in that example, he will guarantee it. And if it doesn't work, it's money back. It's all about risk reward. He's so confident in what he can do that he's willing to risk everything because he knows he can deliver on that promise. Now, spending 100,000 to earn 100,000 doesn't make sense, but that's for 1 year. Every subsequent year after that is money in the bank. So I think what Anthony says, you got to pay more to get more. And it's agency specific in terms of how they want to address guarantees or even missing goals.
Fantastic. Yes. I heard a couple of things in there. One of the things I heard was that it's important to manage the client expectations. Being a small business owner myself, outside of this job, I use a hiring agency or a marketing agency as well, and I had never heard it put in the way that Anthony had noted that we can bring the leads to your business, but it's up to you to close them. So I appreciate the response there. The next question, and one of you mentioned research a short while ago, and it was a nice tee up for the next question, which is, what do you do to keep your clients relevant and specifically around research and reading?
Relevant.
Can they expand on that a little bit? Like, can they follow up and expand on that, I guess?
Quickly type and expand on it.
If you could,
I'll take a stab at it. Relevant in terms of like modern or trendy or
Sure, those are both great words, and unfortunately, this question came from an anonymous attendee. Haven't given, I can't reach back to them, but perhaps we'll give them a moment to send us some additional information, and I can jump to the next question.
Okay, so I can speak for myself because my expertise is in the branding field.
Okay.
When it comes to sort of like being relevant, it's all about just being up to date on current trends, and not only just current trends, but future trends, and what's going on.
Dave just sent us a follow-up, and you're speaking to it right now. Their follow-up reads, technology is always changing. How do you keep up with the latest and greatest? Oh, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, it's just about being, keep reading, keep learning the industry, know what's coming down the pipeline so that your designs kind of accommodate all technologies. And then when it comes to like logos and stuff like that, I go by the Sagi philosophy of less is more. I mean, if you've had a chance to look at our portfolio, minimal design is the most flexible design. It tends to span, you can get the most legs out of it because it's not relying on trend or factors like that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, to expand on it as well, I think you don't want an agency that stays stagnant, right? So you want someone that is always trying to kind of like using this phrase, but I'm going to use it. It's challenging the status quo, kind of willing to put themselves into be comfortable being uncomfortable, in that you're willing to try and do new things that are coming up in terms of what the newest technologies are. Doesn't mean you have to be an early adopter of that technology, but know it's coming down the pipe, be aware of it, know it's there, and be mindful of it, because at the end of the day, that piece of technology, whether it's design or marketing or web related, could be that particular thing that client might actually need to solve the problem that they're trying to have. So just being aware of those things, and I think having the agencies that are doing those research, keeping on top of who the top people are in the industry, expanding past. I mean, we quote Chris Ado all day right now, and he's one guy that we lean on. He always kind of brings what the newest, latest thing is going on, and there's a bunch of other top designers that we follow that do that. So I think just you can get a sense of, I think, a client, an agency's portfolio too, and when you interact with them, with whether they're willing to, I think, push boundaries, and whether they sound like they're stagnant in what they've been doing, or whether they're explorative, or looking into what those new ideas and pieces are that are out there.
But also consider your client's clients when you're doing design. I mean, if your client's client is a 60-year-old retiree, you don't need to design for or have designs or the newest trends, or it doesn't need to accommodate virtual reality or augmented reality, because there's no way in hell they're going to be using that stuff. And new flashy tech can be frightening. That's a broad generalization, but I think you get my point, right?
Yes. And I've got 3 more questions for you. So strap yourselves in. We're almost to the finish line.
All right.
The next question, which I think is almost a spin-off from our previous responses that you've given. The next one reads: when you think about emerging trends in the marketing and creative sector, are there 1 or 2 trends that stand out where an agency might offer more advantage to an organization versus their own in-house teams?
I'd say any sort of like newer emerging technology, like I mentioned, VR and AR, they're coming down the pipe. I think in-house design team, like companies with in-house design teams, can be a little bit slower to adapt or to adopt technology. For example, we had a client come to us, and they wanted they want us to quote them for a project that used NFTs in combination with augmented reality for an app that does a thing. I'm like, I can't give it away. And that is absolutely 100% something that we do not do. That is just way too new. We have no experience with augmented reality or NFTs. And so we attempted to reach out to some fellow agencies and contacts and got the same response, just no. So to answer your question, just being early adopters of new technology, I think gives you the upper hand over companies with in-house agencies, especially if that's a company that is maybe looking to incorporate that tech into their brand in some way.
I think to add to it as well, depending on what the situation is, again, a lot of these questions are always going to be the favorite answer of it depends, but depending on what the situation is, sometimes bringing in an outside agency, we touched on it earlier, is it brings in a fresh perspective. It can give you a new angle. It can give you another side of something that maybe the in-house team isn't looking at. Not to say anything about in-house teams. In-house teams are great. I've worked with those. I've worked in that situation before. It's great, but I will admit from personal experience, you get very immersed in what's going on in the particular business that you're working in, that you sometimes forget about what's going on the outside world and what kind of other ideas and thought processes can come into it. So sometimes bringing in an outside agency just for maybe even just the strategy component of something, and then having your in-house team doing the execution is also another way around it, just to kind of have that fresh perspective or that fresh knowledge. And then through that conversation and through that piece, you'll have a better understanding of whether your in-house team can take on that workload, whether they have the skill set to take that on, or whether it's better to work with either that agency or even, another one that specializes in something else. Going back to the specialist thing in VR and AR as an example. But that's kind of where I can see where maybe an outside agency could be helpful to a business.
Sorry, Jamie, can you read that question back one more time? I think I have another answer. I just want to make sure I understood the question.
Absolutely.
All right.
When you think about emerging trends in the marketing and creative sector, are there one or two trends that stand out where an agency might offer more advantage to an organization versus an in-house team?
Okay, maybe I don't. No, but I will add to this, or add with this, is that trends and technology, all that kind of stuff are great. I stand by everything I said previously about just being an early adopter. Ultimately, what we're seeing, and it's been happening for years, even since I was a school, proud graduate, 2010, is that this industry is quickly becoming commoditized. I mean, it's just so easy to outsource to cheaper markets. Fiverr is readily available to anyone who wants to use it. Good luck, Godspeed if you do. I think our main commodity and the thing that you just can't really outsource, you can't commoditize, is our knowledge. And I think knowledge and the experience that you bring is key. And keeping up to date on that just makes you more valuable than the next guy. I don't know if that added.
Excellent. Thank you.
Right.
Now we're down to two questions here. So the first of the next two questions reads, when do you know, or when is it the right time to challenge the status quo or disrupt within the creative marketing for an organization?
There must be a student who asked that, because I was right there with you. Disrupt. I mean, I don't know. It depends on. It depends. It always depends. But it depends. You gotta know who you're serving, and that's priority number one. You gotta serve your client. I say go out there and disrupt your heart out when it comes to personal projects. If you got something to say and design is the way to say it, go right ahead. But priority number one is you got to serve your client. You got to serve their needs. You got to solve the problem. You got to achieve their goals.
Yeah, I think Ryan pretty much hit on it. It's before you think about the things that you want to do because you want to do them, thinking about the things that your client would like to see. And always put your mind in the mindset of the client. Always think of things from their perspective. And do they want the company that's challenging the status quo or being risky and appearing risk-taking, or do they want the safe bet? So it's something to consider when you're deciding whether challenging the status quo is the right option for you.
Yeah, and if that's how you want to brand position yourself in the market as some sort of disruptive designer or disruptive design agency, and that's how you brand yourself and you're good at it, presumably you are, go for it. But just make sure there's a market for it. Just make sure you get seen and heard. And ideally, they'll come to you when the time is right.
Fantastic. Thank you. And on the home stretch, the last question for today's session, and this one is a bit more personal in your own experiences. It reads, would you mind sharing, or is there a specific or favorite project or campaign that you've ever worked on that stands out to you?
Yeah, we have the answer. Anthony, go for it. I know we have the same answer.
Yeah, so there's one project, and it's actually the first project that Ryan and I worked on together. Actually, technically the second, but the first big one. And it was called Sick Not Weak, which is a mental health organization down in the city. That was a very, very robust, complicated, fun, and fulfilling project to work on. It literally checked off all the boxes, I think, for us through that process. We learned a lot. There was a lot of just moving parts that educated us quite a bit in how things, one, how we run things on our own as at the time freelancers, but two, just how to navigate different personalities and different things. And then obviously with the mental health side of things, learning more about that and understanding more of that, you know, shedding a different light, giving us a different perspective, not just on the topic of mental health, but just how to interact with people at the same time, understanding that, you know, someone who is upset may not actually be upset at you. There's something else going on. So, I mean, it literally, it ranged everything from on a personal level to a business and professional level. I think from a business angle, there was a lot of skills that we learned from, you know, like I said, how to manage certain people and how to manage certain clients on our own, and how to quote and budget, and even just the tech that we were doing. We built some pretty cool stuff working with them. So we got to learn, there's a lot of different tech that I got to learn and learn how to program, and different angles for Ryan in terms of different UX and UI stuff that he may have never had to work on before. So that project brought a lot of different angles and tons of value to us, both personally and professionally.
That was not the answer. I was thinking it was that. My answer was, I love all my children equally. And they're all amazing and awesome clients and projects.
That too.
Yes.
Great answers, guys. Thank you so much. And that brings us to the Q&A portion of today's session. This is the point in the presentation when slides start to pop up onto the screen almost magically, just like that. So I want to thank, first off, let's give an acknowledgement to Kirsten Spencer Arscott, who works quietly in the background to coordinate these events and to ensure that slides like the one on the screen here magically appear when we need them to. And she does a great job. So thanks to Kirsten for your work. And also thanks to Ryan and Anthony for making yourselves available today. You know, we truly appreciate you joining us and sharing your own experiences and expertise with our listeners. So on behalf of the 87,000 Georgian alumni around the world, we continue to be proud of our graduates, and we thank the two special grads here today for being with us. For the folks that are listening at home, we want to thank you for attending as well. If you'd like more information about the Georgian College Alumni Association, you can of course visit our website, georgiancollege.ca/alumni. For Georgian grads, we invite you to come out and join the Georgian Alumni Network. It is an exclusive cloud-based network for Georgian graduates. You can visit it at georgianalumni.ca. And of course, for anybody that would like to make a gift to support student success at Georgian, you can go to georgiancollege.ca/giving to make that donation. And Ryan and Anthony, I'll just acknowledge as well that thank you so much for your time today. And we will, as an association, be making a donation to support a student bursary to honor your time with us here today as a show of gratitude for each of you being here. That's it from me. Once again, I'm Jamie Campbell, Manager of Alumni Engagement at Georgian College, and it has been a real pleasure speaking with Ryan and Anthony today. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.